Think about it. Eric Wilson, undrafted, coming out of college, signs a 1-year deal. Alex Singleton, undrafted, coming out of college, goes to the CFL, makes something of himself. TJ Edwards, undrafted. Davion Taylor's a 3rd-round pick, incredibly raw, not ready to play. Sean Bradley's a 6th-round pick. Where are the assets used at this position? It should be no surprise that these linebackers can't play like Bobby Wagner and Devin White and Eric Kendricks and all the great linebackers in this league. You got to put assets into the position.
Football 24/7 across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel with NFL insider John McMullen. Coordinator Day today as the team turns the page following the game on Sunday. I guess there was some conversation about Sunday, and then we begin to look ahead to week number 8 and the Detroit Lions again on the road. Eagles will be in Detroit, all presented by Stateside Vodka. Pay attention and use the code JAKIB on statesidevodka.com and you'll get 15% off of a Stateside Vodka soda. So use it for the Stateside Vodka soda. You'll get 15% off. Johnny Mac on Coordinator Day. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing well, Krause. Yeah, I think we all could have used a little Stateside vodka after Sunday's game.
John, I want to start today's Football 24/7 with a math quiz for you.
Uh-oh. This could be trouble.
How many minutes are in an hour?
60, as far as I know.
You're correct. 450,000 hours times 60 minutes equals what?
You're putting me on the spot. I'm going to say So
I do know the answer, and believe me, I had to use a calculator.
What was it again? No,
450,000 times 60 minutes.
All right, so let's break it down to 45 times 6, and that would be so 270. So I don't know, somewhere how many zeros we putting on there?
Well, you can call
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros.
You can equal that. 27 million minutes of
I was
consumption.
Close.
You were close. 27 million minutes of consumption on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. And I want to thank all of our viewers, subscribers, and those that get engaged by liking and sharing all of the content, beginning with Birds 365 and ending every night with Football 24/7. And Johnny Mac, thank you. That's a lot of work, man. That's a lot of minutes of consumption.
Wow, 27 million, you said? 27 million. Wow. Yeah, that's a big number.
Really good stuff. So now that I got that out of the way, and I don't take that lightly, I say thank you. Let's jump into bullet points from Coordinator's Day today. I'm sure that the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, was asked about the comments from Fletcher Cox that were made post-game. Yes, and what did he say?
Yeah, he was, and Jonathan handled it pretty well as could be expected. I think, the comments were pretty pointed from Fletcher. And he basically just called him an unselfish player who's trying to win. and he doesn't hold it against him. But he did mention that it was, fueled out of the emotion of the game, right after the game, which is true. I think if it were at a different time of the week, Fletcher would have probably, come down a little bit after that emotion. But clearly, and this has happened way before the Raiders game, he is not happy with how he's being used in this defense. And this is what happens when you have veteran players coming off a coaching staff that they had a lot of success with. And if you think about Fletcher Cox specifically, look at it this way. It's a guy, if you think about the 5 years of Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz, made 5 Pro Bowls, made the playoffs 3 times, won a Super Bowl in that system. So from Fletcher Cox's perspective, you look at things like, well, I did pretty well under that system. Why don't you use me like that? And that's why sometimes when you make a coaching change, it's such a huge decision, and it has reverberations all across the organization, from support staff to things fans don't even think about, people losing their jobs that aren't even a part of the coaching staff, for instance. From the players' perspective, you think about, sometimes they want their own guys in there. And from the other perspective, from the new coaching staff's perspective, sometimes you got to deal with players that are loyal to the old coaching staff. And ultimately what happens is things roll over pretty quickly. And the veteran players tend to move on and go in a different direction. I think you're seeing the genesis of that with the Eagles and the veteran players that are left. And there aren't many of them from the Super Bowl era, from the Super Bowl season. Look, these guys, I look at Jason Kelce on the offensive side of the ball, same thing. He's not happy. He showed his frustration, didn't verbalize it, showed his frustration on the field. They're going to have to turn the page on these guys next season and go in a different direction. And it happens all the time. All you have to do is look at the AFC North and the history of the AFC North. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who've had 3 coaches since 1968. Think about that. 3 coaches since 1968. When Mike Tomlin goes in the Hall of Fame, and he will go in the Hall of Fame, all 3 of them will be Hall of Fame coaches. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. That's it. You look in the same division, the history of the Cleveland Browns, change coaches every year or two. They were an abject disaster. They finally started to turn things around a little bit with Kevin Stefanski last year. Hopefully they learn from their mistake this time, but we'll see. The worst thing in the NFL is upheaval. The best thing in the NFL is continuity. You're seeing the results of upheaval. It gets ugly. Doesn't mean it can't get better. But Jeffrey Lurie should learn from this. You should learn from the Andy Reid era. Continuity.
Football 24/7 with John McMullen. I keep hearing Barrett Brooks going back to training camp in many different conversations when he was analyzing the new head coach Nick Sirianni, and he was talking about veteran players. And his thought, and I'm obviously paraphrasing from my memory, but his thought, John, was that veteran players will follow you and buy in if you can prove to them that you can make them better. And I guess that matches up with what you just said, using Fletcher and Jason as examples.
Yeah. Barrett's exactly right, as you imagine he would be as a former player. I mean, players constantly said, look, the only thing they care about when it comes to coaches is, are you making me a better player? Fletcher thinks right now he's not a better player than he was under Jim Schwartz. And he's not. He's not performing. But in a lot of ways, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're upset. You're not playing what you want to play, which is 3 technique. He plays a lot of 3 technique, but he also plays some 5 technique, some 4-eye technique. He doesn't like it. And he doesn't like it, and that manifests itself on the field. He's not performing like Fletcher Cox. So there's a give and take there. But I will say, if you're a young coach and you want the players to buy in, you got to get the veteran players on board. And on the Eagles defense, the 2 guys you got to get on board with this group are Fletcher Cox. Well, there were 3, but Brandon Graham is hurt. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Darius Slay. He has not gotten Fletcher Cox and Darius Slay on board with this scheme. And it's a mistake. But if they're not going to buy in, they're not going to buy in anyway. So, the thought process is, when you're ready to get good again, those guys probably aren't going to be here anyway. So if you're Howie Roseman after this season, you got to start thinking about getting out of the Fletcher Cox and Darius Slay business, because they're not firing the coaching staff. People can forget about that. They're not firing this coaching staff. They're going to be here. They're going to be given 2 years minimum. And again, depending on Jeffrey Lurie's ego. Now, could that change? Well, they're 2-5. If they go 2-15, yeah, they might fire him. But they're not going to go 2-15. They're going to be here. They're going to be given a chance. And if you're not going to get on board, well, you might as well start looking in other directions.
Well, which begs the question, since we're knocking on the door of the trade deadline, do you think there's conversation, John, about Fletcher, for example, or no?
Well, there's conversations. If anybody picks up the phone, Howie Roseman will talk to you, except the reporters. But he'll talk to anybody. But, Fletcher makes so much money. That's a really difficult deal to do in season. That would be more of an issue probably for the off season. So, yeah, they're going to be talking about players, a lot of players leading up to November 2nd. But it's going to be players like Joe Flacco. Joe's not going to be here next year, right? Even if he stayed. So, you get a 6th-round pick that can turn into a 5th-round pick. Why not? You have Gardner Minshew. You just bump him up to be the backup. And it's not that big of a deal. Now you start thinking, if they lose to the Lions, for instance, well, pull the plug on any potential playoff hopes at that point, even if you haven't pulled the plug, which you should have. But nonetheless, Steve Nelson playing well for the most part, better in corner, 1-year deal. If you can move him, he's not going to be here next year, most likely. Anthony Harris, he's not going to be here. He's hurt right now, so that complicates things. Eric Wilson, if you can dump him on somebody, dump him. So, yeah, they'll be talking about players like that. But anytime you have the big contracts, Fletcher, Derek Barnett would be even more likely to be moved because he's on the final year of his deal. Again, they're not bringing him back, but he makes too much money. So that complicates things.
John, I want to ask you about Alex Singleton. And I'm trying, and I'm sure you're going to be able to explain it. I'm trying to understand why Alex Singleton, a year ago, when he got on the field, he was not, they couldn't take him off the field. They couldn't get him off. What is the difference between Alex Singleton 2020 and Alex Singleton 2021?
I think he's playing like everybody else. Another guy playing out of position and doing things he's not as comfortable with. The strength of Alex is he's very instinctive. Um, he's very quick sideline to sideline. Um, you want him running downhill while the defensive tackles tie up blockers and him playing on the weak side. And then he's going to get a lot of tackles. Now he's being asked to be a cover two linebacker, which is about pass coverage, about ability to stay with receivers, ability to understand zone drops. And that's not his strength as a player. So, you know, so again, we can talk about Fletcher Cox, we can talk about Alex Singleton, we can talk about Darius Slay, and people are going to jump down. And believe me, I've heard about it. They're jumping down Jonathan Gannon's throat. Well, he's not using these guys correctly. Yeah, he's probably not. Although, guess what? Darius Slay is having a better year this year than he had last year. So it's not like they have to be playing more poorly than they did last year. Fletcher is, Alex is, Darius isn't. So right there, you have an example of three different players not playing what they want to play, not playing what they're used to playing necessarily. In the case of Alex, he's not as entrenched as those two. But it's interesting because Alex seems to like playing better. He seems to like this defense better than Jim Schwartz's defense. So it's kind of a opposite disconnect. He enjoys the more varied nature of this defense than Jim Schwartz's defense, but he's not performing as well. So it all comes down to the individual. But the bottom line is the Eagles linebackers are just a disaster. And to me, that's personnel related more than anything else. Because I can tell you, I've never seen, I'm sure it's happened before. I can't keep an eye on all 32 teams these days, but I've never seen a defensive coordinator rotate 5 different linebackers in the modern era where you only play 2. I mean, he's rotating everybody, trying to figure out somebody who can play, and none of them are performing. And I'm talking about Alex, Eric Wilson, TJ Edwards, Davion Taylor, even Sean Bradley at times. I mean, that's directly in the lap of Howie Roseman. And how many times have we talked about the Eagles and linebackers? You got to go back to Jerry Robinson in the 1970s for the last time they took a linebacker in the first round of this draft. You can listen to Seth Joyner all over the place. It's one of the great linebackers in the history of this franchise complaining about it. Football's changed. Linebacker isn't nearly as important as it once was. But those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Because it's not as important as it once was, doesn't mean you can do what the Eagles do and completely ignore the position. Completely. Think about it. Eric Wilson, undrafted, coming out of college. signs a 1-year deal. Alex Singleton, undrafted, coming out of college, goes to the CFL, makes something of himself. TJ Edwards, undrafted. Davion Taylor's a 3rd-round pick, incredibly raw, not ready to play. Sean Bradley's a 6th-round pick. Where are the assets that used at this position? It should be no surprise that these linebackers can't play like Bobby Wagner and Devin White and Eric Kendricks and all the great linebackers in this league. You got to put assets into the position and get something to help the defensive coordinator, can help the defensive coaches. I mean, same thing with Jim Schwartz. It's no different. It's been this way for years with the Eagles. They do not value the position to the point of absurdity. I agree with them to a point and say, you're right. It's not as important as an edge rusher or a defensive tackle or a corner or a safety. It is. It's last on the defensive side of the ball now. But it doesn't mean you can completely ignore it.
Amazing. Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. So much to unpack in that conversation. It's going to take me 24 hours until we come back tomorrow to try and process everything you just said. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Modern NFL or not, if the linebacker position is not valued at all, it's still important. It's still an important part of the defense. Whether it's valued or not, you can have the best front four. If you don't have linebackers, or you don't, as you said, put assets into it, you have an Achilles heel. An Achilles heel is going to lead to exposure. Exposure is going to lead to being exploited. Exploited's going to lead to long drives and touchdowns.
Yeah, and I would say it's interesting because of where Jonathan Gannon comes from. You think about Indianapolis. Well, Indianapolis had Darius Leonard, who's one of the best coverage linebackers in this league. Before that, he was at Minnesota, where they have Eric Kendricks, who might be the best coverage linebacker in this league. You look around the league and you see as I mentioned, the Bobby Wagners, Logan Wilson had an opportunity. He's turned into a real good player. They had an opportunity to draft him a couple years ago. Wasn't good enough for him. We talk about Micah Parsons in Dallas now. He's a rookie, but you can see the talent. Devin White, anybody who watched the Super Bowl, that guy's phenomenal. You saw Fred Warner earlier this year with San Francisco. Levante David, you missed. The Buccaneers have two great linebackers. They're the Super Bowl champions. I mean, it's like, on the offensive side of the ball, running back is linebacker. But, you'd like to have Derrick Henry. Tennessee's not complaining. Trust me. When he's running for 200 yards and destroying people's defenses, you still see the point of really good running backs, whether it's Dalvin Cook or Aaron Jones, what he's turned to in Green Bay, and Christian McCaffrey, if he ever gets healthy again. Ezekiel Elliott it seems to be back to a certain degree for the Dallas Cowboys. It's still meaningful. You look at Cleveland and their running game with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb when he's healthy. It still matters for some teams. That's for sure.
Seems to matter for the teams that are winning.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to win. Look, and here's my problem with the Eagles from an organizational perspective. We're probably getting too deep here. I always say they like to be innovative. They like to be considered. It's very important to them for people to say they're innovative. but they're really not innovative because they really go along with the current trends. For instance, I just talked about the linebackers, and the last linebacker they drafted in the first round. You got to go all the way back to the 1970s. Now, Howie Roseman isn't a part of that entire generations, plural. There are a lot of different executives. Jeffrey Lurie only owned the team for just over a quarter century. That predates him. But in the Lurie Roseman era, they don't like running backs. We always talk about, well, we'll do these mock drafts. You can cross running back off. You can cross linebacker off in the first round. There's exceptions to that rule. Christian McCaffrey, I talk about it all the time. In 2017, the Eagles were going to draft Christian McCaffrey if he fell to them. But he's a different kind of running back. He's very unique. He's a better route runner than most receivers. So they're looking for these unique unicorn type players. If that ever came up at the linebacker position, maybe they would take a linebacker. But they're too obsessed with what I just said, those value charts. Well, you can't take a linebacker here. You can't take a running back here. Sometimes the player overrides it. And if you get Derrick Henry, who cares if he's a running back? Take a good football player. Take a good football player and go about winning a little bit differently. Devin White's a perfect example of that with Tampa Bay. That's a top 10 pick at linebacker. That's ballsy if you're the Buccaneers to take a top 10. I forget exactly what number. I can look it up. But that's very, very ballsy to say, you know what? In the modern NFL, this kid's so talented, I'm going to take him number 5. That's what he was. Number 5 overall. Number 5. All of a sudden, you're a couple years down the road and you're winning a Super Bowl. And you got a chance to win a second. There's different ways to do things. They found a quarterback a different way. They didn't have to get a quarterback, number 5 overall. They said, what? Yep, Tom Brady's available. He's 160 years old. So what? We're ready to win if we get a quarterback. So maybe go out and get Russell Wilson. Maybe go out and get Aaron Rodgers. Maybe go about it a different way. Eagles don't think that way.
Good stuff from John McMullen tonight. Football 24/7 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Don't want to run out of time tonight before I ask you from the offensive side of the football. I'm assuming Shane Steichen talks in the coordinator day, but I don't know what he talks about.
Yeah,
because Nick runs the offense and Nick focuses in on the play calling. So I'm not sure. Shane's name never comes up, but
well, his name rarely comes up because Shane doesn't say much. I just pulled up the transcript. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 questions he got asked today. And, he gives a 1 or 2 sentence answer. And he's just one of those coaches that isn't going to give you a lot of information. He's a nice guy, but I mean, it's all coach speak, and you don't hear much talk about it because he doesn't say much. He doesn't, like Jonathan Gannon, for instance, if there's anybody who should have went in the shell today, it's JG. He didn't. He went up there and he answered the questions like he usually does. I joked about it, his usual ebullient self. Good morning, Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. He's the most energetic guy in the world. You're not going to get him down. They're struggling, but Shane Steichen goes about it a little bit of a different way, and he just doesn't give you much information. So that's why you don't hear people talking about him.
Anything out of those 19 questions? 19 good questions? Anything at all? The call, the penalty, anything at all? Nothing.
But he gives you, my question was, what was the thought process coming into the game plan, where they went under center with Jalen Hurts and handed the football off to Miles Sanders? I asked him, was that about getting Miles involved, or was it about something you saw about the Raiders? He said we wanted to get the running game going a little bit. And then he goes into, I thought Miles did a heck of a job on that first drive. And that's what you get from him.
What is the update, John, on Miles Sanders?
Miles is week to week. He's the Eagles haven't ruled him out just yet, but it's very, very unlikely he's going to play against the Lions. Anytime you hear that week to week designation, that's generally going to be multiple weeks. In Miles' case, it could have been worse. I'm hearing 2 to 3 weeks. So he's not going to be here against the Lions on Sunday. It's going to be Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell. Maybe they elevate Jordan Howard from the practice squad for the game, but don't expect Miles Sanders on Sunday.
Yeah, if you watched him when he was getting carted off, the look on his face kind of said, he was in a lot of pain, it looked like, when they were taking him off the field. How did our buddy Lane Johnson come out of the game on Sunday?
He actually missed the last 3 plays. I think it was 3. He got his foot stepped on. So it wasn't serious. He just tweeted, as a matter of fact, glad to be back out there with my brothers. Hashtag unfinished business. So Lane is fine from a health perspective, and he should be playing on Sunday.
John, last thing on Jordan Mailata. Wanted to ask you about his play yesterday when you did a little bit of a deep dive after the game on Sunday. What are you seeing? You seeing some weakness in his game a little bit? The speed of the game? What are you seeing from Jordan Mailata?
I mean, when Jordan, I think people expect too much of Jordan. He's not. He's a very good player. It's almost astonishing how good he is for his lack of experience in the game of football as a whole. When he does have trouble, it's usually with speed rushers. And Yannick Ngakoue is one of the best speed rushers in football. And that's one Ngakoue is really poor against the run. So I would have looked at that if I were the Eagles offensive coaching staff and said, I'm gonna let Jordan get off the football against Ngakoue and beat him up, because he can do that. But if you're going to sit back there and let that guy rush, he's going to beat you with that speed on occasion. I think overall Jordan is playing very well. He will, as I said, if you're expecting him to be perfect, he's not going to be perfect against speed rushers. So that's just part of it. When you're 6'8" and 380 pounds, if somebody's 255 pounds and shot out of a gun like a bullet coming around the corner, he's going to beat you occasionally. But you're also going to bully that type of player as well in the running game if the Eagles ran the football. They run it with the quarterback.
Back to work tomorrow. All eyes, all cameras, all cell phones on QB2 tomorrow.
The mustache is relevant again.
Yes, sir. Johnny Mac, great stuff. Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen back on the road this week, out to Detroit for week number 8. We'll cover it all. We'll be right back here tomorrow, all presented by Stateside Vodka. Again, go to statesidevodka.com. Use that keyword JAKIB. 15% off of the Stateside Vodka soda for flavors in the vodka soda pack. Use JAKIB and get 15% off. Johnny Mac, great stuff, brother. Thank you, man.
All right. Thanks, Krause.
All right. See you next time, everybody.